Minji stepped through the doorway and found herself floating. Not falling, but suspended in space like a leaf on still water. She could breathe somehow, though there was no air she could see. The stars surrounded her in every direction, above and below and beside. She had never seen so many stars. The shapes moved through the darkness. They were enormous, larger than cities, and they did not move like ships or stations. They moved like living things, flowing and pulsing with their own light. Colors shifted across their surfaces, colors Minji had no names for. Patterns that hurt to look at, but were also beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. One of the shapes came closer. As it approached, Minji felt something in her mind. Not words, not pictures, but pure meaning pressing against her thoughts like water against a dam. "What are you?" The question hit her like a physical force. Minji gasped and tried to answer, but she had no voice here. She tried to think her answer instead. "I am human." The shape pulsed with light. The meaning that came back was complex, layered with many emotions at once. Confusion, interest, something that might have been hunger. Human, small, weak, alone. Why exist? It was not asking out of cruelty. It genuinely wanted to understand. Why would something small and weak and alone continue to exist when existence seemed pointless? In the observation room, every screen showed the same thing. Minji floating in simulated space, facing something that should not exist in the simulation's code. The Academy's chancellor had arrived, along with the dean and several senior officials. Everyone watched in tense silence. "What is she facing?" the chancellor demanded. She was a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering field, ancient and powerful. "First contact with a hostile unknown intelligence," Instructor Vex explained. The simulation founders designed this phase to test whether any species could negotiate with something completely alien. Something that does not think like us, does not value what we value, cannot be reasoned with using normal logic. And what happens if she fails? "Every cadet who reached this phase before failed within minutes," Vex said quietly. "They attacked and died, or they froze and failed. The hostile intelligence is designed to be incomprehensible. Has anyone passed? No one has ever reached this phase before," Vex said. "Until now." In space, Minji thought about the question. Why exist? It was such a simple question with such a complicated answer. We exist because we choose to, she thought back. We are small, yes. We are weak compared to many things. We are often alone. But we choose to keep existing anyway. The shape moved closer. Minji felt its attention like heat against her skin. More meaning pressed into her mind, faster now, more intense. Choice? No logic. Small things should stop. Weak things should end. Alone things should fade. Why choose pain? Because Minji thought pain means we are alive, and being alive means we can change things. We can make tomorrow different from today. The shape seemed to vibrate with something like anger or frustration. Change? Nothing changes. Stars burn. Stars die. All things end. Your species will end. Why delay? Minji felt the weight of that question. She floated in space, tiny and insignificant, facing something vast and immortal. What could she possibly say to something that had watched stars die? She thought about her grandmother, about the reclamation zones where people had taken dead Earth and made it live again, about humanity surviving ice ages and plagues and wars and environmental collapse, about herself lasting 6 months in a metal box through nothing but stubbornness and hope. You're right, she thought. We will end someday. Every human who ever lived has died or will die. Our sun will burn out. The universe itself might end. Nothing lasts forever. Then why? But that is not the point, Minji continued. The point is not how long we last. The point is what we do while we are here. We tell stories. We make art, we love each other. We help each other survive. We take broken things and fix them. We teach our children. We remember our dead. We look at stars like you and wonder what they mean. The shape stopped moving. For a long moment, there was no meaning, no pressure in Minji's mind, just silence and stars. Then, softer than before, not understand. Minji smiled even though she was not sure the thing could see smiles. That is okay. I do not understand you either. But maybe we do not need to fully understand each other to choose not to hurt each other. Why not hurt? Another simple question with a complicated answer. Because, Minji thought carefully, hurting things is easy. Anything can destroy. But building things, creating things, keeping things alive, that is hard. That takes effort and choice and hope. And we choose the hard path because the hard path is the one that makes life mean something. More silence. The shapes in space moved in patterns Minji could not predict. She waited, floating, patient. She had learned patience in the bunker, in the desert, in every phase of this endless simulation. Finally, meaning came again, but different this time. Quieter, almost gentle. Tell story. Tell why. Small, weak, alone things choose exist, and so Minji told a story. She told the story her grandmother had told her, about Earth in the worst times, about cities falling and technology failing and people scattered across a dying planet, about how it would have been easier to give up to let the end come. But instead, she told them, people chose differently. They gathered in small groups and shared what they knew. They planted gardens in poisoned soil and waited years for food to grow. They taught children to read even though there were no schools. They sang songs even though there was little to sing about. They fell in love and had babies and argued about stupid things and laughed at bad jokes. They chose life even when life was hard, Minji thought. Not because it made logical sense, but because they were human, and humans do not know how to stop hoping. She told about her grandmother teaching her to grow vegetables, to find water, to make fire. She told about the reclamation zones slowly turning green again. She told about humanity reaching for the stars not because they had solved all their problems on Earth, but because reaching is what humans do. We are small. She thought to the vast intelligence floating in space. We are weak. We are often alone. But we carry each other in our memories and our stories. We carry our dead and our unborn. We carry the past and the future. And that makes us bigger than we look. The shapes in space began to glow brighter. The meaning that came back was complex, layered with many things Minji could not fully understand. But underneath it all was something that felt like respect. Understand now, small. Things that choose become big things. Stories make meaning. Meaning makes existence worthwhile. Humans teach important. Truth. The space around Minji began to change. The stars grew brighter. The shapes moved in patterns that seemed almost like dancing. And meaning came one last time, clear and strong. Pass, continue. Teach others. Everything went white. Minji opened her eyes to find herself lying in the simulation pod. The lid was open above her. Bright lights hurt her eyes after so long in dim spaces. She tried to sit up and her body screamed with pain. Every muscle was stiff. Her mouth was dry. Hands helped her, gentle and careful. She heard voices but could not understand them at first. Then her mind caught up and she realized people were talking to her. Cadet Minji, can you hear me? It was Instructor Vex's voice, rough with emotion she had never heard from him before. Yes, she croaked. Her voice was barely a whisper. You need to say it, Vex said. For the record, say you are withdrawing from the simulation. But I passed, Minji said, confused. You passed, Vex confirmed. But you need to officially withdraw now. The simulation is over. I withdraw, Minji said. The words felt strange, like speaking in a foreign language. She tried to sit up again, and this time medical staff helped her. She looked around the chamber and saw it was crowded with people. Hundreds of faces staring at her. Some were alien, some were human. All looked shocked. Lyra pushed through the crowd, her crystalline body pulsing with bright, happy colors. You did it, Lyra said, her wind chime voice shaking. You impossible, stubborn human. You did it. Hyun was there too, and Daiho, Jiwon, and Sora. All the human cadets gathered around her like a protective wall. Hyun had tears in his eyes. How long? Minji asked. Her mind still felt foggy. 96 hours, Vex said. He stood nearby, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. In simulated time, you experienced 8 months. You are the first being in 400 years to complete the Earth simulation. You are the first being ever to reach and pass Phase 6. The crowd erupted in noise, but Minji barely heard it.
8 months.
She had been away for 8 months, living in scenarios designed to break her, and she had survived. More than survived. She had won. Medical staff were checking her vital signs, asking her questions she answered automatically. But her mind was elsewhere, thinking about the bunker, the robot, the vast intelligences in space. The simulation, she said to Vex. The last phase. What was it? Vex hesitated. First contact with a hostile unknown. But something changed. The AI adapted to you instead of you adapting to it. It learned from you. It asked me why humans exist, Minji said. And what did you tell it? Minji thought about her answer. About stories and hope and choosing to continue even when continuation is hard. About being small and weak and alone but still mattering. I told it the truth, she said simply. The bunker was small, maybe 4 meters by 4 meters. Metal walls, metal floor, metal ceiling. A single dim light flickered overhead. In one corner sat a basic toilet. In another, a small sink with a slow drip. Against the back wall was a narrow bed with a thin blanket. And that was everything. Minji stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, taking it all in. There was one door, sealed shut with no handle on the inside. No windows. No other people. The air smelled stale and recycled. A speaker crackled to life in the ceiling. "This is your shelter," said a flat, computerized voice. "A catastrophic event has occurred above ground. You must remain here until it is safe to emerge. Current estimate unknown. Life support systems are functioning at 70% capacity and declining." The speaker went silent. Minji sat down on the bed. The mattress was hard and uncomfortable. She looked around the tiny space that would be her entire world for who knew how long. Most people would panic. Most people had panicked. This was the phase that broke cadets. Not through physical hardship, but through psychological torture. Isolation. Uncertainty. The slow awareness that you might be trapped forever in a metal box. But Minji did not panic. She breathed slowly and thought about what she knew. This was a simulation, which meant there were rules. There was an end point. She just had to survive until she found it. She started with routine. Routine was important. Her grandmother had taught her that during the hard years in the reclamation zones. When life is chaos, you create order through small rituals. Minji divided her day into sections. Morning exercises, push-ups, stretches, walking in circles. Breakfast. She had discovered that the sink provided water and small food packets appeared in a slot near the door once per day. Work time. She examined every centimeter of the bunker, looking for details, keeping her mind active. Lunch. More exercise. Dinner. Then evening time for thinking and planning. She talked to herself. Not from madness, but to keep her voice working, to hear human sound in the silence. She sang songs her grandmother had taught her. Old Korean folk songs about mountains and rivers and home. In the observation room, medical monitors showed Minji's vital signs. Her heart rate was steady. Her brain activity showed stress, but nothing near the breaking point that usually appeared within days of Phase 5. "How long has it been now?" asked Professor Thane. He had barely left the observation room, fascinated by what he was witnessing. 59 hours real time, Instructor Vex replied. His voice was rough from lack of sleep. 6 months simulated time. 6 months in that box, Lyra whispered. She looked at the screens with worry that made her crystalline body pulse with dim light. How is she still functioning? I do not know, Vex admitted. Every other cadet showed signs of psychological breakdown within the first simulated month. Some lasted 2 months before we had to pull them out. But she is still stable. Hyun stood nearby, his face pale. We need to stop this. 6 months alone in that bunker, it is torture. She can withdraw at any time, Vex said. She knows the safe word. She chooses to continue, does she? Ji-won asked quietly. Or has she forgotten this is a simulation? That question hung in the air, heavy and troubling. On the screen, Minji was doing something strange. She had found a small piece of metal that had come loose from the bed frame, and she was using it to scratch marks on the wall, tally marks counting days. But she was also writing words, small messages to herself. Day 47. Remember grandmother's soup. Write down recipe when you get out. Day 83. The water drip sounds like rain. Pretend you are camping. Day 134, you are not alone. You carry everyone with you. She was creating meaning where none existed. She was building a narrative to keep herself sane. Then something new happened. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a small robot. It rolled out on treads about the size of a large cat, with a camera eye that swiveled to look at Minji. Maintenance check, it said in that same flat computer voice. Do you require assistance? Minji stared at the robot. She had not seen another moving thing in months. Even a robot felt like a miracle. Hello, she said. The robot paused. Its programming had not expected that response. Do you require assistance? It repeated, Can you talk? Minji asked. I mean really talk, not just follow scripts? Another pause. Longer this time. I am programmed to perform maintenance functions and respond to emergencies. That is not what I asked, Minji said. She sat down on the floor, bringing herself to the robot's level. Can you have a conversation? In the observation room, alarms started beeping. The simulation AI is showing unusual activity, reported a technician. It is dedicating processing power to the maintenance robot far beyond normal parameters. What is it doing? Vex demanded. I think, the technician said slowly. I think it is trying to talk to her. Back in the bunker, the robot had rolled closer to Minji. I have conversational protocols, it said. They are usually inactive. Can you activate them? Minji asked gently, as if speaking to a shy child. Why? Because I have been alone for a very long time, Minji said. And I would like someone to talk to, even if that someone is a robot. The robot's camera eye whirred, focusing on her face. You are human. Yes, humans are social creatures. Isolation causes psychological damage to your species more than most others. That is true, Minji agreed. Yet you show minimal damage, the robot observed. How? Minji smiled slightly. I talk to myself. I sing. I remember people I love. I mark the days and make plans for when I leave. I pretend the water drip is rain and this box is a camping trip. She paused. And now I have you to talk to. The robot was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice sounded different. Less flat, more curious. I am a simulation. I am not real. Why does talking to me help? Because connection is connection, Minji said. Real or simulated, it matters to me. My brain does not know the difference between a real friend and an artificial one if the conversation is good. You are lonely. Very, Minji admitted. But that is okay. Loneliness is not the same as being broken. Loneliness means I remember what it feels like to not be alone. That memory keeps me human. In the observation room, every single person was silent, watching this impossible conversation. The AI is learning from her, Professor Thane said with awe in his voice. It has never done this before. What is it learning? Krell asked. What it means to be human, Thane replied. Days passed, simulated time flowing like a river. Minji and the robot talked every day. She told it about Earth, about her grandmother, about the reclamation zones and learning to survive. The robot asked questions, genuine questions, trying to understand. Why do humans persist? The robot asked one day. Your species has faced extinction multiple times. Logic suggests you should have abandoned hope. Hope is not logical, Minji said. She was doing push-ups while they talked, keeping her body strong. Hope is something else. It is the thing that makes us keep going even when logic says to quit. I do not understand. Minji stopped exercising and sat up. Tell me something. Are you just running a program right now? Or are you choosing to talk to me? The robot's camera eye swiveled. I do not know. The distinction is unclear. That is hope, Minji said. That uncertainty. That not knowing but choosing anyway. You are not sure if you are just a program or something more, but you talk to me anyway. That is very human. I am not human. No, Minji agreed. But you are being human right now. You are making meaning in an empty place. The bunker's lights flickered. An alarm sounded, then stopped. The speaker crackled to life. Life support at 50% capacity. Failure imminent. Minji looked up at the ceiling, then back at the robot. Is this the end of the simulation? Unknown, the robot said. This phase has no predetermined endpoint. It adapts based on the cadet's mental state. You should have broken by now. Should have, Minji repeated. But I did not. Why? Minji thought about her answer carefully. Because breaking means giving up. And humans are very, very bad at giving up. We are stubborn and hopeful, and we believe that tomorrow might be better even when today is terrible. It is not always logical. It is not always smart. But it is what makes us human. The lights flickered again, then brightened. The alarm stopped. The metal door sealed for months began to open with a grinding sound. Beyond the door was not the wasteland Minji expected. Instead, she saw stars. Millions of stars stretching into infinity. And floating among them were shapes, massive and alien and beautiful. The simulation had reached Phase 6. A phase that had never activated before. A phase no one knew existed. In the observation room, Instructor Vex stood up so fast his chair fell over. What is that? He demanded. Unknown, the technician said, hands flying over controls. Phase 6 was theoretical. The simulation founders included it in the code, but it has never triggered before. What is it supposed to test? First contact, the technician said. With something incomprehensible. The desert sun beat down like a hammer made of fire. Sand stretched in every direction, endless and empty. Minji walked with steady steps even though her mouth felt like dust and her tongue was thick and heavy. She had been walking for hours, maybe days. Time felt strange in the simulation, like it moved at different speeds depending on how much attention she paid to it. When she focused on her thirst, hours crawled by. When she focused on the horizon, time seemed to skip forward in chunks. She stopped walking and looked at the sky. The sun was high and merciless, but she studied it anyway, squinting against the glare. She checked the shadows at her feet. Based on the angle, it was past noon. She turned slightly and adjusted her direction. In the observation room, the crowd had grown even larger. Word had spread through the academy that a human cadet was attempting the Earth simulation and actually surviving. Cadets skipped classes to watch. Even some professors had arrived, curious about what was happening. She is navigating by the sun, noted Professor Thane, an elderly being covered in silver fur. Without instruments, without training in this specific environment, how? Humans evolved as persistence hunters, explained another professor, this one resembling a floating brain in a protective sphere. They tracked prey across vast distances using only environmental cues. The ability is instinctive. Lyra stood at the front of the observation window, her crystalline form dim with worry. Beside her, Yun watched the screens with clenched fists. The other human cadets had all arrived, unable to look away even though watching was painful. How long has she been in there? Sora asked. 41 hours, Instructor Vex replied. He had not left the observation room since the simulation began. In simulated time, she has experienced approximately 4 months. 4 months, Jiwan repeated softly. No one has lasted this long. On the screen, Minji had stopped walking. She knelt in the sand and began digging with her hands. The sand was hot enough to burn, but she kept digging until she was knee-deep in a hole. Then she stopped and waited. What is she doing? Someone asked. Watch, Vex said. Minutes passed. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Then in Minji's hole, something changed. The sand at the bottom became darker. Wet. Impossible, Krell breathed. There is no water source there. The simulation is a true desert. She is collecting condensation, Professor Thane said with admiration in his voice. The temperature difference between the surface and deeper sand creates moisture. It is minimal, but she found it. Minji carefully collected the damp sand and squeezed it, letting drops of water fall into her cupped palm. It was barely enough to wet her lips, but it was something. She repeated this process for over an hour, gathering tiny amounts of water, one painful drop at a time. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. Minji buried herself in the sand to conserve warmth, leaving only her face exposed. She watched the stars appear, brilliant and countless in the clear desert sky. She had seen these stars before in books and simulations. She used them to check her direction again. When morning came, she continued walking. The desert phase lasted 3 days. By the end, Minji was moving slowly, conserving every bit of energy. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin was burned red by the sun, but she never stopped moving forward. And then the desert vanished. Minji stumbled and almost fell as the sand beneath her feet became grass. Cool air rushed over her sunburned skin. She looked up and saw trees, buildings in the distance, and other people. The simulation had changed again, but this time it was different. This was not a natural environment. This was civilization, or what was left of it. She stood at the edge of what looked like a refugee camp. Dozens of makeshift shelters made from scrap metal and torn cloth. People moved between them, thin and tired. The sky above was gray with smoke. Phase 4 had begun. Social warfare. A woman approached Minji, her face suspicious and hard. She spoke in a language Minji did not recognize at first, but then the words made sense. The simulation was translating, putting meaning into sounds. Who are you? The woman demanded. This is our territory. Minji raised her hand slowly, showing she had no weapons. I am looking for shelter. And food if you can spare any. The woman's eyes narrowed. We have barely enough for ourselves. Why should we share with you? This was the test, Minji realized. Not survival against nature, but survival among people when resources were scarce. This was about reading others, about persuasion and alliance. This was about being human in the hardest way. Minji looked at the woman carefully. She saw the way the woman held herself, protective and tired. She saw the worn shoes and the careful way the woman positioned herself between Minji and the camp. This woman was a guardian, someone who protected others. I understand, Minji said softly. You have people depending on you. Children, maybe? The woman's expression shifted slightly. A tell, Minji had guessed correctly. I do not want to take from them, Minji continued. But I can help. I know how to find water in dry places. I know how to build shelters that keep heat in. I know how to make fire without fuel. We have fire, the woman said, but her voice was less hostile now. Do you have enough food? Minji asked. The woman said nothing. Another tell. I can show you how to set traps for small animals, Minji offered. How to identify which plants are safe to eat. My grandmother taught me. The woman studied Minji for a long moment. Then she made a decision. One night. You can stay one night. If you prove useful, maybe more. Thank you, Minji said. In the observation room, Professor Thane was shaking his head in amazement. The simulation NPCs are programmed with psychological profiles from 17 different species. They are designed to be difficult to negotiate with. How did she know what to say? She read the micro-expressions, Vex said. Humans are social creatures. They evolved to understand each other, to form groups, to work together even with strangers. She used that ability. Over the next simulated days, Minji made herself useful to the camp. She taught them her water-finding technique. She showed them how to improve their shelters against the cold nights. She helped catch small animals using simple traps made from scrap wire. But more importantly, she listened to people. She learned their stories, their fears, their hopes. She memorized names and relationships. When disputes arose, she helped mediate, finding compromises that left both sides satisfied. The simulation kept throwing problems at the camp. Food shortages, sickness, rival groups threatening violence. Each time Minji adapted. She was not the strongest person there, not the fastest or the most skilled, but she was the one who brought people together. One evening, sitting around a small fire with several camp residents, Minji shared a story her grandmother had told her. It was about the old days on Earth, when a great environmental collapse had nearly destroyed humanity. Cities had fallen, technology had failed, but people had survived because they helped each other, because they shared knowledge and worked together. Your species almost died? Asked an old man in the camp. Yes, Minji said. Many times. We are not strong like predators. We are not tough like some animals. But we do not give up. And we do not face things alone. The old man nodded slowly. That is wisdom. In the observation room, cadets who had been watching for days were silent. They had come expecting to see a human fail, maybe even break. Instead, they were watching something they did not fully understand. They were watching humanity's greatest strength in action. Lyra turned to Hyun. She is teaching them, Lyra said quietly. Even in a simulation designed to break her, she is teaching. That is what humans do, Hyun replied, his voice thick with emotion. We teach, we share, we survive together. On screen, the camp had changed. The shelters were better built. People looked healthier. There was laughter around the fires at night. And at the center of it all was Minji, tired but steady, holding the community together through nothing but words and wisdom. The simulation AI observed all of this, with something like confusion. It had expected the human to fight, to dominate, or to submit. Those were the patterns other species followed. But this human was doing something else entirely. She was making the simulation better, transforming the struggle into cooperation. The AI made a decision. It had never done this before in 400 years, but the human had triggered something in its programming. A hidden protocol waiting for exactly this moment. Phase 5 activated, the camp dissolved like smoke. Minji found herself somewhere new, somewhere dark and cold and utterly alone. She stood in a small metal room with thick walls and no windows. A bunker, and she could hear very faintly the sound of alarms beginning to wail. The long dark had begun. The jungle wanted to kill her. Minji understood this within the first 10 minutes. The heat pressed against her skin like a heavy blanket soaked in water. Every breath felt thick and sweat already ran down her back. The trees towered above her, their canopy blocking most of the sky. Vines hung everywhere like green snakes, and the ground was a mess of roots, mud, and rotting plants. She stood still and listened. Birds called from somewhere high above. Insects buzzed in clouds around her face. Water dripped constantly, making it hard to hear anything else. But underneath all that noise, she heard something moving through the brush. Something big. Minji did not run. Running would be stupid. She did not know where to run, and running made noise that predators followed. Instead, she looked around carefully and spotted a thick vine hanging from a nearby tree. She grabbed it and tested her weight. It held. She climbed. Her arms burned as she pulled herself up, hand over hand, feet pushing against the rough bark. She climbed until she was 5 meters off the ground, hidden among the leaves, and then she stopped and waited. Below her, the bushes moved. A creature emerged, and Minji's breath caught in her throat. It looked like a tiger, but wrong. Its body was too long, its legs too thick, and its teeth hung past its jaw like sabers. The creature sniffed the ground where she had been standing moments ago. Its head swung left and right, searching. Minji stayed perfectly still. She controlled her breathing, making it slow and quiet. She had learned this from her grandmother, who had learned it from her own grandmother. When dangerous things are near, you become part of the tree, part of the earth. You become nothing. The creature circled the area twice, then gave up and moved away into the jungle. Minji waited 5 more minutes before climbing down. In the observation room high above the simulation chamber, Instructor Vex watched the monitors with growing interest. Around him, other instructors and dozens of cadets crowded to see the feeds. She did not panic, said Instructor Krell, a mantis-like being with compound eyes. Most cadets panic immediately. She climbed, Vex noted. Humans are not natural climbers, yet she knew to go up. The simulation is still in its first phase, Krell said. It will become much harder. On the screen, Minji was moving through the jungle carefully. She stopped often to examine plants, touching leaves and smelling them. She found a stream and knelt beside it, studying the water before drinking. What is she doing? Asked a young cadet. Learning, Vex said. She is learning the environment. Minji spent the rest of the day exploring a small area of jungle. She did not rush. She found plants she recognized as safe to eat, remembering lessons from her childhood. She found stones with sharp edges and used them to cut vines. By the time the simulated sun began to set, she had built a simple shelter between 2 trees, raised off the ground and covered with large leaves. She made no fire. Fire would attract attention, and she had nothing to cook anyway. Instead, she ate some berries she had gathered, drank more water, and settled into her shelter as darkness fell. The jungle changed at night. New sounds emerged, stranger and more frightening. Things howled and screamed. Something massive moved through the trees, shaking the ground with each step. Minji lay in her shelter, eyes open, listening to everything. She did not sleep much that first night. But she survived it. When morning came, the simulation changed. Minji woke to cold. Terrible, bone-deep cold that made her gasp. The jungle was gone. She lay on ice, and snow fell from a gray sky. The temperature had dropped so far that her breath came out in clouds of white mist. She forced herself to stand, her body already shaking. She wore the same thin gray suit, useless against this cold. Around her stretched an endless plain of white snow and ice, broken only by occasional rocks and bare hills. This was the second phase, the Arctic. In the observation room, cadets muttered in surprise. The simulation usually took days to advance phases, giving cadets time to adjust. But Minji had adapted so quickly to the jungle that the AI had moved her forward early. She will freeze within hours, Krell said. Perhaps less, but Vex said nothing. He watched as Minji turned in a slow circle, studying her new environment. She was shivering hard, her lips already turning blue, but her eyes were calm and focused. Minji knew she would die if she stayed still. She started walking, forcing her legs to move even though they felt like ice. She walked toward a cluster of rocks she could see in the distance. Rocks meant possible shelter, possible tools. As she walked, she thought about her grandmother again. The old woman had told her stories about Korea's harsh winters, about times when people survived with almost nothing. Cold kills quickly, her grandmother had said, but it kills the panicked first. If you stay calm, you can think. If you think, you can survive. Minji reached the rocks and found a small cave barely deep enough for her to crouch inside. But it blocked the wind, and that was something. She gathered all the dead grass and dried moss she could find around the rocks and pulled it into the cave with her. She piled it around her body as insulation. Then she looked at her hands. They were already numb. She rubbed them together, forcing blood to flow. She curled into a tight ball, making herself as small as possible to conserve heat. Hours passed. The cold never stopped, but Minji never stopped fighting it. She flexed her muscles constantly, keeping blood moving. She breathed carefully, warming air in her mouth before letting it reach her lungs. When the snow finally stopped, she crawled out of the cave and searched the area. She found more rocks, and where there were rocks, there could be friction. She found 2 pieces of flint and a flat stone. She had never made fire this way herself, but she had watched videos and read books. Her grandmother had shown her once, long ago. She gathered the driest grass she could find and made a small nest. She struck the stones together. Nothing happened. She tried again, and again. Her fingers were clumsy with cold and the stones kept slipping. She tried for an hour, then 2 hours. Her hands bled from cuts, and her fingers screamed with pain, but she kept trying. On the 3rd hour, a spark caught. A tiny orange glow appeared in the grass. Minji bent down and blew on it gently, feeding it her breath. The glow grew. Smoke appeared. Then finally a small flame. She had made fire. In the observation room, several cadets cheered. Even Krell's antennae twitched with what might have been approval. Remarkable, Vex said quietly. The fire was small, but it was life. Minji fed it carefully with grass and small twigs, building it up slowly. She held her hands over it, feeling returning to her fingers with painful intensity. She survived her 2nd night in the simulation beside that fire, feeding it constantly, never letting it die. When morning came again, the cold vanished. The ice melted away in seconds. Minji stood up, exhausted and hungry, and found herself in a new place. A desert stretched before her, endless sand under a burning sun. No water anywhere in sight. Heat waves shimmered in the distance like ghosts. Phase 3 had begun. Minji looked at the desert and smiled slightly. She had spent her childhood in the reclamation zones where water was precious and every drop mattered. She knew about thirst. She knew about heat. She started walking, and the desert swallowed her up. Instructor Vex leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the screens. The human had survived 2 phases already, lasting longer than most cadets survived 1. And she showed no signs of breaking. How far will she go? Krell asked. I do not know, Vex replied. But I am beginning to think we should have designed this simulation differently. What do you mean? We designed it to test if other species could survive like humans, Vex said slowly. But perhaps we should have asked a different question. Perhaps we should have asked what makes humans able to survive at all. On the screen, Minji walked across burning sand, steady and determined, while 300 cadets watched in growing amazement. The simulation chamber was massive, stretching up like a cathedral made of metal and glass. 300 cadets stood in perfect rows, their bodies representing every corner of the galaxy. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few glowed with their own internal light. Among them, 5 humans looked almost plain by comparison. Minji stood near the back, her dark hair tied in a simple braid. She was shorter than most cadets around her, quieter too. For 6 months, she had attended the Galactic Military Academy without drawing much attention. That was about to change. Instructor Vex walked across the platform, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with deep red scales and eyes that could spot a lie from across a room. He had trained soldiers for 40 years, and his voice could make even the bravest warrior feel small. Today, Vex announced, his voice booming through the chamber, you will learn about failure. The cadets shifted nervously. Nobody liked hearing that word. Behind me is the Earth simulation, Vex continued, gesturing toward a large pod that looked like a coffin made of black glass. It has existed in this academy for 400 years. In that time, 12,000 cadets have attempted it. 12,000 have failed. Whispers spread through the crowd. Everyone had heard stories about the Earth simulation. It was legendary, a horror story that older cadets told to scare the new ones. Some said it drove people insane. Others claimed it was impossible by design. The simulation places you in survival scenarios based on Earth's history, Vex explained. Before humans reached the stars, before they had technology, they survived on a death world through adaptation alone. This simulation tests whether other species can do the same. So far the answer is no. A large cadet with blue skin and forearms raised his hand. Why is it so difficult, Instructor? Vex's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Because Earth tried to kill humans every single day and they survived anyway. They had no venom, no claws, no natural armor. They were slow compared to predators, weak compared to larger animals. By all logic, they should have gone extinct. But they did not. Minji felt eyes turning toward her and the other humans. Her friend Hyun stood a few rows ahead, his jaw tight. Daeho and Jiwon stood together near the center, while Sora was somewhere to the left. Being human at the academy meant constant attention and not always the good kind. The simulation will strip away everything you rely on, Vex continued. Your technology, your weapons, your training. It will place you in environments designed to break you. You will be alone. You will be afraid. And you will fail. Then why offer it? Someone called out. Because one day one of you might pass, Vex said. And that cadet will understand something the textbooks cannot teach. They will understand what it means to survive when survival seems impossible. The chamber fell silent. No one moved. No one volunteered. Minji raised her hand. The silence broke into confused murmurs. Cadets turned to stare at her. She kept her hand up, steady and calm. Cadet Minji, Vex said slowly. You wish to attempt the simulation? Yes, Instructor. A laugh came from somewhere in the crowd, then another. Soon dozens of cadets were laughing or whispering. A human volunteering for the Earth simulation seemed like a joke. If aliens could not pass it, how could a human? Vex raised one clawed hand and the laughter died. You understand what you are volunteering for? I understand, Instructor. You may die in there. Not physically, but mentally. The simulation can break minds. We have medical teams ready, but the damage can be permanent. I understand, Minji repeated. Vex studied her for a long moment. His eyes were old, and they had seen many confident cadets become broken ones. But something in Minji's steady gaze made him curious. Very well, he said. The simulation will begin in 1 hour. Use that time to prepare yourself. The cadets were dismissed, flooding toward the exits in waves of color and sound. Minji walked calmly toward the preparation rooms, but she did not get far before Hyun caught up with her. Are you insane? He asked, grabbing her arm. You know what that simulation does to people? I know. Then why? Minji looked at him. Hyun was from New Busan, a city built on floating platforms. He had grown up with technology, with safety nets and climate control. He was a good soldier, but he had never gone hungry, never been truly cold. Because someone needs to, she said simply. Daeho and Jiwon found them next, both looking worried. Minji, please reconsider, Jiwon said. She was the oldest of the human cadets, already 25, with sharp intelligence and careful planning. This is not worth the risk. Maybe it is, Minji said. Why do you think you can do what thousands of others could not? Daeho asked. He was usually quiet, analytical, and his question was genuine rather than mocking. Minji thought about her answer. She thought about her grandmother, about growing up in the reclamation zones where Earth was still healing from centuries of damage. She thought about learning to grow food in dead soil, to find water in dry places, to build fires without matches. Because I remember what they forgot, she said. Before anyone could respond, her roommate Lyra appeared. She was not human, but had become Minji's closest friend at the academy. Her crystalline body refracted light in soft colors, and her voice sounded like wind chimes. You do not have to prove anything, Lyra said gently. No one thinks less of humans because this simulation is difficult. I am not trying to prove anything, Minji said. I just want to try. Lyra's light flickered with concern, but she nodded. Then I will be watching. We all will. The hour passed quickly. Minji changed into the simple gray suit required for the simulation. She ate a light meal and drank water. She did not pray or meditate. She simply sat quietly, breathing slowly, thinking about nothing in particular. When the time came, she walked back to the simulation chamber. The room was full again, but this time cadets lined the observation windows above. They wanted to watch the human fail. Instructor Vex stood beside the pod. Last chance to withdraw, he said. I'm ready. No one is ready for this, Vex said, but he opened the pod anyway. Minji climbed inside. The interior was soft and dark. She lay down, and the pod sealed above her with a hiss. For a moment, everything was black and silent. Then light exploded behind her eyes, and the world changed. She stood in a jungle, dense and green and screaming with life. The air was thick and hot. Water dripped from massive leaves above her head. Somewhere nearby, something roared. The simulation had begun.